The collective consciousness of our present American identity is a direct result of a persistent and systematic conditioning. Our once great, enlightened, ingenuous, freedom-loving people, creatively innovative, inspired by the prospect of liberty, and dedicated to the proposition that indeed freedom is deterministic and not at all implied, has at long last succumbed to the snare of complacency, a nation so steeped in this malignancy of self-betrayal, as Jefferson explained, if once the people become inattentive to their public affairs, you and I and Congress and the Assembly's judges and governors shall all become wolves. It seems to be the law of our general nature in spite of individual exception. And further he says, it is as the manners and spirit of the people which preserve a republic in vigor. A degeneracy in these is a canker which soon eats at the heart of its laws and constitution. As I convene to assemble these words, I hazard that I should not express the absolute desolation from where they are born. I must confess that I cannot avoid its permission. I make this plea with sincere conviction and absolute assuredness that so many of the words of our founders have now revealed themselves to be incontrovertible. I will offer you a few of these here so you might be, as Jefferson said, be persuaded to even that which is good for your own good. I, as not more than a fervent student of history, can hardly remain silent when the alarms are ringing everywhere. As the old adage implies, those who refuse to study history are doomed to repeat it. This is the terrifying reality that I can clearly see is about to be fully realized. Take, for example, the Patriot Act 1 and 2, and a whole host of other executive orders, all designed to eliminate your rights little by little. And here's what our founders said, referring to that. A departure from principles in one instance becomes a precedent for a second, that a second for a third, and so on, till the bulk of the society is reduced to be more automations of misery, to have no sensibilities left but for sin and suffering. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, but when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evidences a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is the people's right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide a new guard for their future security. This has been evidenced through these actions. That is what he was talking about. It should be clear when you can see a pattern that is developing over the course of time, which is a systematic elimination of your rights, that we have the right and duty to rise up against that. He continues to be quite unequivocal. There is an artificial aristocracy founded on wealth and birth without either virtue or talents. The artificial aristocracy is a mischievous ingredient in government, and provision should be made to preserve and prevent its ascendancy at all costs. This is a direct reference to the oligarchy of bankers who run our Federal Reserve and indeed who were responsible for its inception in 1913. This was to prove to be the most poisonous and deadly attack upon our nation. Even Wilson himself admitted years later that he had been tricked into signing the Federal Reserve Act and that he felt that his action would cause our great and prosperous nation to be reduced to ruin. In fact, he was right. Listen to what Jefferson said about banks. Excuse me, looking up for these notes. I am an enemy to all banks, discounting bills or notes for anything but coin. It is said that our paper is as good as silver because we may have silver for it in the bank where it is issued. This is not true. One or two of these persons might have it, but in a general application would soon exhaust their vaults and leave the ruinous proportion of their paper in its intrinsic worthless form. Everything predicted by the enemies of banks in the beginning is now coming to pass. We are to be ruined now by the deluge of bank paper. It is cruel that such revolutions and private fortunes should be at the mercy of avaricious adversaries, who indeed, instead of employing their capital, if any they have, in manufacturing, commerce, or any other useful pursuits, make it an instrument to burden all the interchanges of property with their swindling profits, profits which are the price of no useful industry of theirs. Very unequivocal statements by our third president. Put down all banks, admit none but a metallic circulation that will take its proper level with the like circulation of other countries, and then our manufacturers may work fair competition with those in other countries, and import duties which a government may lay for the purposes of revenue will so far place them above equal competition. I sincerely believe that banking establishments are more dangerous than standing armies, and that the principle of spending money to be paid by prosperity under the name of funding is but swindling futurity in a large scale. Wow, this is, all these statements are directly and absolutely in direct conflict with precisely what's going on in our country, and exactly as he predicted it. The system of banking, ever reprobated, I contemplate it as a blot left in our constitutions, which, if not corrected, will end in their destruction, which is already hit by the gamblers and corruption, and is sweeping away in the progress of fortunes and morals of our citizens. When wrongs are pressed because it is believed that they will be borne, resistance becomes morality. In other words, when our president and our Congress continually make reference to the fact that we have to do these things like the Patriot Act and enact these laws to protect you from the terrorism and the threats that impose or may be preying upon our nation and our people, and that it's necessary that we must surrender some of our rights for the security and prosperity of all of us, and that we should be willing and interested in doing so. And this is absolutely directly in conflict with what this founders suggested in the very beginning, which said, if you are to surrender but even one of your rights, of your inalienable and given constitutional rights, for the purpose of security or otherwise, then you've already doomed yourself. I mean, that's a paraphrase. I'm sure that I don't have the direct quote, but I will attend to trying to locate it. But the essential bottom line is that when we take the slippery slope, you know, such as that quote originally, the one that I had referenced, said, prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed in light of transient causes, but when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably in the same object with evidence of design reduced them under absolute despotism. Okay, when these things are occurring, we now see them so blatantly and so clearly. So how can we but anything to avoid this recognition of the fact, and that a government has no power except this government is not supposed to have any power over the people except from which it derives from them, and to surrender your rights and your constitutional rights that have been granted to you is a crime. It's your duty to wake up and insist and resist at all costs these things, or I fear that this is a very clear and certain road that we are now headed down, and we are most certainly going to find ourselves in the coming years. It's worse and worse. It's not going to get any better. Believe this. This is an absolute, sure and serious situation that every one of us should be seriously considering and understanding the implications of which.